Have you ever been playing a game or watching a show and go, man, I wish this minor thing was explored much more thoroughly? Maybe it's just one specific character, or maybe like an entire group or race that's never really delved into or explained, but we all have something that makes us go, yes please, I want more of this thing, and then we never get more of this thing. For me as a kid, that was the concept of the Branded in Path of Radiance. They were this mixed race of human and furry, hated by everybody, had unique powers, and had so much potential for interesting lore. And looking back, I think the main reason that the Branded got such a high bar of intrigue for me was thanks to their representative, so to speak, the Desert King Stefan. Now, when you hear the name Stefan, you likely don't think of Stefan himself. You instead probably think about his incredibly bizarre recruitment. People like to mean Xavier as the most garbage recruitment requirement in the series, but I'll give Xavier credit. At least I know Xavier is in Thracia 776. Stefan shows up with zero build-up, zero explanation, and you get him by having one of two specific units wait on a specific tile in a specific map. Doing so will cause them to dig up a whole grown-ass man from inside the desert sands. I have no idea how you are supposed to figure out to do that, but regardless, it's the first thing people think of when they think of Stefan. Either that or his incredible stats, especially relative to when you get him. Stefan comes in roughly midway through Path of Radiance, with capped weapon rank, his ultimate weapon already in his inventory, his ultimate skill already learned, and base stats that are so good all of his growth rates could reach 0 and he'd still be deployable on the final chapter. He's so powerful, he manages to be a sword-locked infantry unit in Path of Radiance and not be god-awful. I guess that was supposed to be the reward. He's overtuned on purpose because he's a super secret unit, so balance is thrown out the window and they just made him as cool as possible. Which, honestly, I'm here for. Stefan is the kind of stupid bullshit I love to see in Fire Emblem. But you know I wouldn't be talking about Stefan if all he had going for him was a wonky recruitment, so let's jump into his character from the top. His recruitment, the wonky premise aside, gives a solid introduction to him. He addresses the Lagoo with respect, and he joins the army because he genuinely wants to learn more about the beast tribes of Gallia. He speaks with such a genuine sincerity that Leith and Mordecai can't help but agree to speak with him. Though, looking back on it, I have to remark that in his join chapter, all the enemies are Lagoo. So, Stefan wants to learn about the Lagoo by helping the Lagoo slaughter the Lagoo. An odd way to show one's enthusiasm, but hey, I'm not a man to judge how one man expresses his interests. Once Stefan is in your army, he has a lone-based conversation with Ike, wherein Ike acknowledges how random and bizarre his appearance is. Stefan apologizes for not introducing himself sooner, and he seems to be a cheerful and likable enough fellow. He remarks that he's noticed Ike's sword style seems unrefined, and was able to discern that Ike's teacher had recently left him, what with Grail contracting the father of an FE Lord disease, and you know how that goes. Stefan offered to help Ike in his swordsmanship, a seemingly random offer of kindness that makes Ike ask a question that's been on most players' minds since the beast snuffed him out of the sands. Just who the hell are you? And Stefan dodges the question, saying Ike doesn't need to know who he is to learn how to kill from him. And that's all that Stefan has in terms of interactions in the main story. It's clearly not much at all. I mean, the only things you'll learn about him is that he can swing a sword swish swoosh, he's pretty friendly, and he wants to learn more about the Beast Lagoo. But thankfully, we have the classic Fire Emblem support system to learn more about him. Though Stefan only has a meager 2 support chains. But if there is ever a series that stands on quality over quantity when it comes to character dialogue, it's gonna be the game series with Thracia 776 in it, so don't think there's not a lot to talk about here. His supports are with Mordecai and Soren, and of the two, the Mordecai support is the meatier one we're gonna dig into first. His support with Mordecai has the tiger ready to tell Stefan all about his homeland, but Stefan doesn't have questions about what Gallia is like, only if Mordecai likes his home. Mordecai responds with pride befitting a proud Gallian tiger, and asks Stefan if he feels the same towards his home of Benyan, to which Stefan has no such niceties to say. His specific word choice of detest confuses Mordecai, due to Mordecai's poor grasp on the English language, and Stefan remarks that sometimes one's ignorance can be a blessing, another phrase that Mordecai struggles to get a grasp on. However, Mordecai doesn't just sit around and remain ignorant. Once he learns what Stefan was saying, he comes back to him thinking he was insulting him. Stefan says that he didn't mean to imply Mordecai was dumb, but rather that Mordecai was blessed to be ignorant of the concept of what it means to hate something. Mordecai asks Stefan to cut all the cryptic talk and just answer his question. Why does he hate Benyon so much? Stefan, of course, doesn't give a straight answer, and instead implores Mordecai to do his own research. He tells Mordecai that he is a member of a group of people called the Branded, and that in learning what they are, it'll explain to Mordecai both why he hates Benyon and why people hate Stefan. Well, Mordecai does do his research, and he finally learns and understands just who Stefan is. Stefan is a Branded, declared a sin against the goddess, a child of a Beork and a Lagoo. Stefan acknowledges that the answer Mordecai found is correct, and asks Mordecai what he will do now that he knows this. He's unsure. The only thing Mordecai knows about the Branded are Tails and Gallia calling them a bad omen and named the Parentless. Stefan agrees, and remarks that that's kind of the reason why most Branded hate Lagoo. The Beork may hate the Branded people, but at the end of the day, Beork still accept that the Branded are half Beork. The Lagoo outright deny their existence, pretend that there is no such thing as a mixed child, and they forever shun their kind. Mordecai is confused by this. After all, in a strictly biological sense, Beork and Lagoo can't breed with each other. And Stefan remarks while that should be true, sometimes, somehow, a child is born that shouldn't be possible. And the mark of that birth isn't always on the child itself. Stefan says that his parents were simple Beorks, and his grandparents as well. No one in Stefan's recent family tree mingled with the Lagoo, and yet, as some sort of divine, mean-spirited joke, Stefan was born with a brand he had no control over. And because of these ancestors whose names were lost to time many, many moons ago, Stefan has been forced to endure a life of prejudice and pain, saying, quote, "I bear no guilt, but the badge of impurity is mine to wear." Stefan admits that being a Branded has changed him. He says that he has great power due to the blood within him, which is likely a fantastic bit of gameplay story integration to explain his incredible combat potential. He once thought of taking revenge on all of those who scorned him, but he ultimately decided to find peace with his kind. He lives with a family he has made from fellow men and women who wear the brand, which is also explaining why he lives in the middle of nowhere in the desert. The harsh locale is probably the only place he can go without the outside world coming to harass him and his kin. As such, he and his kind have been living in exile, finding family and community in the only place that will accept them, their own. But the Branded people do not live without hope, though it's one that's later seeming to be a false hope. Stefan admits the reason he was curious about Gallia back when he first joined their army was that his kind believes that perhaps, since Gallia and Crimea are trying to join Beork and Lagoo in unity, there can be a place for the Branded as well. Though that hope quickly faded because, well, the whole racism thing is still very strong in those places, as Path of Radiance can't go 2 seconds without mentioning. Stefan attempts to cut his ties with Mordecai after this, thinking the man would no longer want to be around him now that he knows what he is, but Mordecai refuses to let Stefan run away. He refuses to pretend Stefan and his kind don't exist, saying, quote, "I have not met the goddess, but if her laws make you unwanted, then I will have nothing to do with her." Stefan, face to face with such genuine kindness, wonders if perhaps the goddess is not to blame for his pain, but perhaps that her rules aren't what he thinks. Stefan's other support in the game lies with Soren, wherein he tries to help Soren join him and his Branded brothers in the desert. However, unlike Stefan, Soren is not so open to admit his lineage. He makes constant attempts to deny Stefan's claims of his Branded bloodline. But eventually, he opens up to Stefan and admits his lineage, and Stefan offers him a place with he and his Branded kin. Soren refuses Stefan's request, however, as he does not want to leave Ike's side, a sentiment Stefan ultimately respects. He tells Soren that when, and he phrases it as not if, when, the day comes that he needs to abandon his Beorc lifestyle, that the Desert Kingdom is always there for him. The entire time, Stefan was just genuinely looking out for his kin, and he doesn't force Soren to come. He thinks that one day he'll have to anyway. And that's all there is to Stefan and Path of Radiance. There's a lot of solid stuff there, but also a lot left up in the air. The Branded's kingdom, the powers that they have, the prejudices they face. Stefan's mere existence brings up all these really interesting ideas, but in spite of the vagueness of it all, Stefan is still a well-defined and memorable character. But hold your horses. Radiant Dawn actually really goes into some stuff about the Branded, what with one of its main characters being one herself, and Stefan makes a reappearance. Micaiah is a character who deserves her own video someday, so I won't go into what she has to offer for the Branded, but don't you worry, Stefan's additions are nothing to sneeze at. Well, for starters, Stefan is back on his bullshit again in regards to his recruitment. He's back in the desert on one specific tile for no reason. Only this time you need to move one of 3 specific units onto the tile instead of just 2 specific units. His reason is different now too. With Mordecai and Leith, he fights to protect his friends from the former war, a reunion on the battlefield. With Micaiah, however, he fights to protect his own kind, showing the ability to easily identify his kin that he showed with Soren. Either way, he makes his return as a dependable and cheerful fellow, with his ultimate weapon in skill in tow yet again. Now, this is where I would go into his supports, but as most of you likely know, Radiant Dawn was infamous for removing supports from the game. So, the only way for Radiant Dawn characters to get development is via base conversations or to have an extended amount of screen time in the main story. And due to his incredibly late join time, Stefan only manages to get a lone base conversation to his name. However, and I do not jest when I say this, it is the best base conversation in the Tellius games. The premise? Yune, basically one half of God, walks up to Stefan and asks him what the fuck he is. This question, as you would imagine, perplexes Stefan. I mean, after all, his people were hated for centuries due to them being abominations to God, and here God is, not even knowing that his kind exists? Yune tells him that she's never heard of anything related to the Branded being sins against God. Imagine that. Being Stefan, who's lived for many decades, being part of a group that was hated for centuries due to the Word of God, only to find out that the Word of God never said any such thing. All his suffering, all of his pain, it was all for nothing more than a lie. And after learning this, all he can do is laugh. Laugh in the face of his suffering. Laugh in the face of God. Laugh in the face of the world that had wrongly shunned him and his kind. And that was the end of Stefan's tale. It's an ending that I still don't know how to feel about. His epilogue has him returning to the desert with his Branded kin, eventually growing in size to the point that a new country emerges from the desert sands. The only other thing of note is that Stefan's epilogue confirms that his bloodline is of the Lions, which, much like much of Stefan's existence, is a really cool fact that I wish was explored more. But again, there's definitely enough of Stefan there to leave an incredible impact on me, and hopefully you too. Thanks again for watching another MS Paint analysis video. I'm loving the consistent amount of attention these videos get, and I'm glad people are learning about new characters thanks to my silly shenanigans. As always, big thanks to the Green Brigand, my lovely counsel. Maybe one day I'll listen to him and actually play a Saga game, who knows. If you enjoyed watching the video, feel free to leave a like on the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, and paint a mural of me on your city wall. Until next time.
Change the world.